Time to check in with Carmi Levy. We do this every Thursday afternoon, CTV tech analyst. Carmi, a couple of stories in the news. Beginning with this, and I bring this up because we had talked about TikTok and a decision last week, and it was being thrown back to the government, specifically as it applies to Canada. So we can say you're saying TikTok is saved, but what does that really mean to us?
Yeah, I mean, what it means is that in the U.S., there's news from both sides of the border. In the U.S., it's that TikTok's U.S. operations have been taken over by a largely American-led joint venture. And so what that means is that the algorithm in the U.S. is different than the one in the rest of the world. It's going to be trained on American data, and data from American users is going to be stored within America's borders. So it'll probably work a little bit differently, and we're already starting to see some differences there. In fact, in some cases, some users are saying that their content is being censored. Company denies that, but the debate rages on. They're wondering if now there's a political sort of oversight to the way TikTok works in the U.S., and that's certainly something we're going to need to keep our eyes on over the next little while. North of the border, there had been a threat from the federal government. They ordered TikTok Canada a little over a year ago to shut down their offices in Toronto and Vancouver. And those were offices that provided support to users. They helped sell ads. They helped influencers and digital creators find their markets, create new videos, build their audiences, all that good stuff. They also provided support and sponsorship to things like the Toronto International Film Festival or the Junos. Or the Indigenous Accelerator and Kids Help Fund. So, essentially what this means is now a federal judge, because TikTok Canada sued the government after that order went out, and now a federal judge has ruled. They've overturned that ruling, and they've said, they told Industry Canada, they've sent it back to Industry Canada. Melanie Joly now has to look at this and review it and decide if she wants to continue it. But the bottom line is these offices stay open. Canadian TikTokers can continue to get support from Canadian employees of the company. And so, I mean, that's a good news thing, because now there are also a lot of cultural sort of touchstones out there. They're going to continue to get sponsorship money and support as well. So it's a good thing for the Canadian social media landscape as well.
All right. So, and it's done deal. We're not going to hear the story come up again?
I mean, it could very well come back, but I think what's changed here is since it was November 2024 when the federal government initially ordered TikTok Canada to close the offices, and so what's changed since then is there's a new administration in the U.S. We know that Donald Trump is a huge fan of TikTok. He says he saved TikTok in the U.S. The global appetite for smacking TikTok around and sort of saying, you're a national security risk, we're going to shut you down. Well, there's no more appetite for that anymore. So I really don't see Canada going against this global trend, and I think it's just going to die very quietly, and they're going to let TikTok operate as it always has in Canada. Speaking
of TikTok, at least speaking of the Canadian version, so Ottawa is also in talks at the same time with Meta about restoring news to Facebook, which is a pretty big deal, right? This is kind of be going back and forth, threats really on both sides. Where are we on this?
Yeah, so I mean, every day if you try to post a link from, say, CJAD's website, you get a message saying you can't because of the Online News Act. So that goes back to 2023 when Meta decided that because of the Online News Act, it didn't want to have to pay to carry this content on its platforms, particularly Facebook and Instagram. So that's been a problem in place for 2.5 years now. Well, now the federal government has said they're in talks with Meta about restoring news to Facebook and Instagram, that they're going to work on some kind of compromise that allows those links to come back, that we won't get those error messages. And that's a really big thing. Canadian media has suffered significantly because social media has been a big driver of traffic to our websites in media, and you take those links away and suddenly, the traffic dries up. So that's been a really big deal for a lot of people. The talks are still in the early stages. There's no real sort of knowledge where it's going to go or what the terms might look like or what the timeline will be. But it looks like, at least, everybody was feuding before. They were all ticked off with each other. At least it looks like they're back at the table and having a conversation. And the end of this 2.5-year nightmare might be at hand.
Did you say they're all ticked off at each other? Is that what you said? No.
I think they were. No, but I definitely think they were, and I like that. That's a good term.
Let me go to this story here, because, again, we've talked sort of around this story. Australia putting limits as to who could access the internet, what age. I know other countries have sort of done the same thing or are looking at doing the same thing. I think France is maybe the latest. But then there's this story that says screen time limits for children are no longer enough. That's actually the headline that you gave me. What does this mean, and what is this telling us?
Yeah, and it's the who this comes from that makes this really notable. It's the American Academy of Pediatrics. So that's pretty heavy hitting, and they've basically said they released new guidance that shows that simply turning off social media, putting a ban in place, doesn't go far enough to ensure that kids are safe from the toxic effects of social media, that you need systemic changes in the way that the platforms themselves work. In other words, make them less dangerous and you won't have to ban them. You also need better approaches to parental engagement so that there's more of a partnership between parents and kids and that they work together to ensure that they kind of grow on social media together. And so it really sort of especially, and the timing of this is really interesting because Australia just introduced its ban. The UK and France and Norway and Denmark and a bunch of other countries are doing the same thing. They're following their lead. And even Canada just announced that it's studying increasing its or moving up its ban, or sort of the minimum age on social media, from 13, where it currently is, to 14.
Yeah.
And so you sort of put that all together, and the world is sort of focusing on bans, and now you have this, esteemed group of doctors in the U.S. saying, you know what, the science does not support that. If that's all you're going to do, our kids aren't going to be any safer than they currently are. Start rethinking our approach to social media, and I think that's a message we should be listening to.
So, but what is that message, though? If it's a message of, just as you said, limiting the age, that's a step perhaps in the right direction. What's being suggested as the next part of this? I mean, otherwise, what, general knowledge? What specifically?
Don't just look at overall screen time and use. We sort of see screen time as a, by definition, bad thing, but there are different kinds of screen time, and they say we have to look at it through a much more nuanced lens. We should also look at the use cases of the technology. There are certain uses of social media that are really, really good. Overcoming isolation, for example, helping kids access mental health supports, and community building. And so they suggest focusing on those, and also providing resources to schools, to parents, and community groups to ensure that they're able to sort of share those best practices within their stakeholder groups as well. So sort of put it all together. In other words, we have to stop looking at social media in such a simplistic way. We have to start looking at it in a much more subtle manner and putting the resources in place so that we can actually take advantage of it and remove the danger from it.
All right, let me move on to the last story, which I think is, I kind of laughed when I saw it. I wonder if this becomes something that, will go to other countries deciding to do the same thing. Of all places, Sweden has decided to ban songs from their Swedish charts for being an AI creation. And obviously this story has been in the news. There are a couple of artists. I think one was a country artist, then there was a female artist. Turns out they weren't real. They were AI, and they actually, went on to Billboard. They charted. Someone made money with this. So what's Sweden done here?
Yeah, so this was a band. They called themselves Jakub, and the song was called I Know You're Not Mine, and it's a melancholic story of lost love. I listened to it. It sounded like I was standing in the middle of the waiting room of my doctor's office, but it is what it is. But it rocketed to the top of the Spotify playlist in Sweden, so the most popular song in Sweden. And then some investigative journalists said, wait a second, we don't really, who are the artists behind this song? They did some digging and realized there was a bunch of music industry executives who turned on some AI software and created it, but didn't want to tell anyone about it. They were afraid to fess up. So this seems to be a theme, right? You like industry insiders using the technology, but not being transparent about it. So as you mentioned in the intro, the top chart in Sweden, basically their equivalent of Billboard, said, you know what? If it's AI created, it's not on our list. It has to be created by a human. And it sparked a huge debate within Sweden over what really constitutes kind of created music. Is AI a violation of that? I don't think anyone is averse or anyone opposes using technology in music. Think back to the freak out over synthesizers a few decades back. But AI is different because it takes humans out of the creative loop, and the lack of transparency. I don't think it's the technology that bothers people. It's the fact that they're not telling anyone about it and trying to pass it off as real, and also using AI to trip the algorithm so that it becomes popular. It's not that this song, I Know You're Not Mine, was particularly good, but because it was built using AI, it was able to trick the algorithm into ensuring that it was super popular and got millions of listens, probably from other bots as well. So when technology is listening to technology, we've removed the art from the equation, and maybe it's time to do something different.
By the way, tell me if this is the song, okay? I want to make sure I have the right one. Is this it, Carmi?
I don't belong inside that light, but I stay and watch all night.
No, because
Okay.
it was in, but interestingly,
Not bad.
it sounds very similar. Like
Okay.
it's sort of got that folky pop sort of vibe to it. In this case, it was Swedish. It's actually Jag Vek du är inte min.
Oh, it's in
And
Swedish.
Please don't judge me for my terrible accent. But it was kind of like that, and you listen to it in the background. It sounds okay. Not a great song, but not a really bad song. And we are going to see more of this. We're seeing it show up on Spotify, on Apple Music, on YouTube Music. This is our reality, and we're going to have to keep our eyes and ears open for it so we know what we're listening to.
So I found the one I played you was titled "I Know You're Not Mine" and had a generic video. I thought that might be it, but this is actually it here, right?
Times in Sweden has been banned.
Oh, there you go. This is the story on the song. Jakub, Jacub.
Yes,
Okay.
and the organization behind it, they're known as Team Jakub.
Of
There's
course
a bunch
they
of
are,
music industry executives. Yeah.
Okay. Got to come up with one of those here so we can have it played on the station. Carmi Levy. Carmi, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Take
Aaron.
care.
Seasoned gamer or just video game curious? This Week in Gaming is the podcast for you. We break down the latest in the world of video games, from basics to beyond. The hottest gaming news, insight, and industry leaders and more weekly. Join me, Naomi Kyle, and stay ahead of the game with all the latest updates, even if you're a total newbie. Stream This Week in Gaming on the free iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.